Keir Starmer is betraying the British people with his latest backdoor reveal of Brexit. The most unpopular Prime Minister in history is negotiating, get this, a Nigel Farage clause with his globalist EU masters, a plan designed to tie Britain to the beleaguered and dying European Union when the Labour Party inevitably lose the next election.
We've already taken steps on food and agriculture to align with the single market. That's the sovereign decision that we have taken. I think we should get closer.
Well, as part of the PM's EU reset, the European Union is demanding that if a future British government dares to scrap their veterinary deal, one that could force us to align with every new EU rule on food, animals and plants, no questions asked, that we must pay a massive financial compensation to them, billions potentially, to cover their costs. And why? Because they're terrified of Nigel Farage and Reform UK winning power and tearing up this Brexit betrayal that's going on right now. The fact they even call it the Farage clause seems a blatant admission to me that they are trying to interfere in our democracy. It's designed to bind future parliaments and financially punish voters who want Britain to be free of them again.
So what you get with Nigel Farage is a lot of slippery things that are said, but when you hold them up to the light, they're not actually true.
Right, this is like going to the kid that bullies you in school and asking them if you don't mind them dunking your head in the toilet again. That's what this feels like with the EU. They are bullies. Remember this.
British politics like this one. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the British I Believe It, or not. Over 98% of viewers watch our content without hitting the follow button. Subscribing is completely free.
The Brexit vote was a fair, democratic expression, and I will always respect that.
Not about going back into the EU. We've left, we're not going back. It's not about the single market or customs union.
This is an embarrassing betrayal. The British people voted in an historic referendum to take back control from Brussels, not pay penalties if we exercise control of our country. This is coming from, by the way, all of this, our so-called allies. The EU, our great close allies, the same allies that have clearly no respect for our sovereignty. They've done everything they can to punish us for rejecting their superstate rule and constantly want our help still to prop up their security. But when we want our bit of sovereignty back, oh, no, can't have that, Britain. Well, Starmer's pledged no return to the single market, no customs union, no freedom of movement. But here we are, aligning with EU laws we can't change, we can't vote on, and he's also opening talks on youth mobility that smells like free movement for the under-30s, if you ask me, and defence pacts that tie us to the Brussels agenda. And now this penalty clause will lock us there forever. We rejected David Cameron's negotiations with the EU because it would have been in, half out. That's what Keir Starmer's doing, the worst of both worlds. Starmer has no authority to sign away our independence like this. He won an election and a mandate promising to make Brexit work, not undo it sneakily. No referendum, no debate. He's just got these secret backroom talks about handing control back to these unelected bureaucrats in Brussels while they laugh in his face and look ahead to a Farage government. Doesn't that show you how much faith they have in him? Well, Nigel Farage is once again right on this. No parliament should or can bind its successor, and Reform have said they will scrap this outrageous deal, thank God. Why should we ever honour clauses meant to scare us into submission? Britain deserves leaders who will fight for our sovereignty, not ones who are grovelling to the EU for a simple pat on the head. And to that 11% of Brits that still give this disastrous Orwellian government a positive approval rating, wake up. And to the EU, I say this. Starmer might be bullied and pandered to you, but as we showed in 1945, our spirit won't be crushed by tyranny in Europe, and nor will you win. Let's talk about this. I've got my fantastic panel with me tonight. Journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee, pub landlord and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Welcome to the show, everybody. Adam, I'll start with you. You know, for all intents and purposes, Brexit really wasn't that long ago. People were quite clear. They wanted a cut with Brussels. David Cameron came back from negotiating with the EU with the worst possible deal, which would have kept us in with no voting powers but a full alignment with the EU. That was rejected by the British people. And what we've got now is Keir Starmer putting in that exact same rejection of that vote. So this is, in my opinion, a complete betrayal of Brexit.
Look, Keir Starmer has said in an interview that he prioritises Davos over Westminster. And the reason he said that is where the real power is. These liberal elites want to be governed and in line with European elites. It's a big club. And especially with Starmer, him and his lawyer mates, they've just given away Chagos, our own territory, and they're making us plebs pay for the privilege. Right, this is the most anti-British government of my lifetime. I'm horrified at what this man is doing. People like me voted in 2016 because we was given that right, our democratic right to vote. Keir Starmer wanted a second referendum because he didn't like the way that people like me, how dare we, go against what he believes. And this is what he's doing. He's take us in via the back door, and it's a stitch-up. Because he knows, anyone in this country knows, Bill surely is starting to realise now, that as long as Nigel Farage, let's hope so, is alive, he will be the next Prime Minister of this country. OK, it's no, you know, shaking your head, Bill. You know, it's a shoo-in, and they know that, and they want to try and punish us.
Linda, I'll come to you in a second because I want you to. I know you've got a lot of notes. Linda, go on.
I feel as though Bill should have.
Yeah, go on. All right, if you want to give it to Bill first, go on, Bill.
Well, firstly, Adam, you know, take the tablets. You know, Nigel Farage a shoo-in when he's on 28% of the vote, historically, is just not accurate.
The momentum, if you go on the streets and speak to people, you'll realise.
The momentum is coming down in terms of Farage's approval ratings. But anyway, let's deal with the facts. Shock horror. The European Union wants some protection from the madness of Brexit. You know, wake up and sniff the roses. The reality is that termination clauses are part of any trade deal. And the clause that you're talking about says that in the event that a future government, it doesn't say that government can't rip up the deal, but if it did, it would have to pay for the infrastructure costs and the reinstatement of border costs. I hear all the invective. You're not in line with British people. By 2 to 1, hold on, by 2 to 1, when you look at the polls, they regret Brexit. 65% of them want a closer relationship with the European Union. Why? Because we've lost out massively from Brexit. There was a study. Well, there was a study just before Christmas that was authored, I think, from Stanford University, that the cost to the UK exchequer in tax terms was about £90 billion a year.
Still less than we pay the EU.
Hold on. What are you talking about?
Look at the facts.
The annual cost was about £5 billion a year, and we benefited from that.
Well, there's a lot of secretive costs that go with that. But UK investment's up 19.5%. We've got exports are up higher.
Carol Malone put this Green Party supporter firmly in his place during the debate. Every time she made a point that many viewers believed was accurate, he shook his head and interrupted to deny it. To many critics watching, the reaction looked dismissive and not very convincing. They argued that instead of properly addressing the points being raised, he simply tried to brush them aside. Carol insisted that everything she said about the direction of the Green Party was true. In her view, Zach Polanski represents a political approach that many people believe is hostile to traditional British values. She argued that when he sits there shaking his head and claiming the party does not support open borders, it feels misleading to those who believe the party's policies clearly point in that direction. Critics often describe Zach Polanski as a political figure who appeals strongly to certain activist groups while ignoring the wider concerns of the public. Some also argue that figures like him gain attention from particular movements because they help push certain causes into the mainstream political debate, especially on international issues such as Gaza. At the same time, supporters of this viewpoint say there is a large number of middle-class activists in Britain who strongly support radical left-wing ideas. According to them, many of these activists criticize their own country more harshly than anything else and spend huge amounts of time involved in political discussions. They contrast this with many working-class Britons who are more focused on daily life and far less interested in constant political arguments. Another major criticism raised during the discussion was about authoritarian tendencies. Carol argued that the Green Party supports policies that could restrict speech and punish opinions they disagree with. Those who share her view believe that some of the party's proposals on regulation and speech could lead to stronger limits on public debate than what currently exists. For critics, this is exactly why they believe the movement should be taken seriously. They argue that the ideas being promoted are extreme and disconnected from everyday reality. In their view, reality sometimes seems to be shaped more by ideology than by facts. Some commentators also argue that figures such as Keir Starmer or Ed Davey are already criticised by opponents for being too critical of Britain's traditions, yet those same critics claim the Green Party goes even further. To them, that shows how far the party's politics sits from the political centre. Because of this, they say the debate around these ideas is important and should not be ignored. Supporters and critics alike believe the public should listen carefully to what is being said and decide for themselves where they stand.
In the EU, so EU's exports are 5%, ours are around 8%. Employment has increased significantly since we left the EU. Ours unemployment in the EU is 6.2%, ours is only 5%. We're doing way better off outside the EU.
Then why, Alex, don't people agree with you?
Well, because it's narrative. And also, a lot of people voted for Brexit to take back control of their borders, which the Tories failed to do, dramatically failed to do, actually.
Yeah,
so that's a massive part of it. But in terms of economically, we are better off outside the EU.
Well, let me come back to that independent study that said £90 billion a year lost in terms of taxes and public spending.
From the central issue at hand here. So the first thing we have to pay attention to is the election is 3.5 years away.
That's true.
And no one can predict what is going to happen. Not you and not you. OK? So the next thing is that this does seem to me, because it does involve a fine, this is anti-democratic. You do not nobble the incoming government because you fear it's going to do something you don't want it to do, because we're a democratic country and we don't do that. We actually don't do that. So Keir Starmer sticks to his policies, but he should not be tying the hands of any future government that comes in and disagrees with him. Because, as I said, we are a democracy.
Then we don't do trade deals and we lose out significantly. And this is about food and agricultural products. And the estimates are that it would boost trade by 22%.
Well, the estimates for the EU stuff have always been actually massively overblown, and their exports are far lower than ours are now outside of them. And the next step we know is customs union, which will destroy all of the trade deals we've done. People voted to leave. That was only 10 years ago. It wasn't 50 years ago.
They voted 52 to 48.
They still voted to leave.
Yeah.
It's democratic right. They wanted to get out of it. They haven't had the Brexit that they voted for. And time again, the Tories refused to implement it, and Labour is now going back on it, right? So I don't think, of course, British people are looking at it going, well, we didn't do anything with it. What was the point, right? Of course they're going to feel that way. And I'm not surprised they do. But they deserve to have what they voted for. If we keep on saying, oh, well, now these polls say this. The polls before Brexit, by the way, showed that overwhelmingly people would have voted to stay in the EU, and what happened? We left. So let's not take polls. If we're not taking election polls,
if we're not
taking election polls for gospel, we shouldn't be taking polls about EU for gospel.
Alex, you say people are not getting what they voted for. Let's go back. Hold on. It wasn't clear what they were voting for. And let's go back.
It was so clear.
Hold on. Let's go back to that referendum. Yeah. I remember the Leave campaign saying that if you vote to leave the European Union, you can remain part of the customs union and the single market. That's due to the atrocious deal that was negotiated ultimately by Boris Johnson, was not on the agenda. It wasn't clear what people were voting for. The reality, I think, has been disastrous. Not just my view, that's the view of British people. If you look at the opinion polling evidence.
Based on polls, which we've just said, we shouldn't take for gospel.
How dare us, uneducated common folk vote for freedom, vote for sovereignty? How dare we? The way you're sounding there, Bill, is why we voted out. Because the elites and the politicians of this country treat people like me and the working man or woman as trash. And if we dare to do the opposite of what they want, they punish us, and that is what has happened.
Linda, I want to come back to you, because I get there's always going to be this Brexit divide between people, right? But my problem with it is that the EU is wanting a lot from us. And we're wanting a lot from the EU. One, Keir Starmer shouldn't be betraying his mandate, which he said he wouldn't be doing all these things. He's now gone and done them. Things that he pledged he wouldn't do. He's gone and done them. I think that's a betrayal for British people. And the EU is hammering us when they're asking us, oh, why don't you come and help defend Greenland? Why don't you cozy up with us instead of America?
I do think there's room for some kind of connection and some kind of support when it comes to military strategy. I think that would be completely advisable.
With a trade bloc. It's a trade bloc, let's be honest.
No, I'm talking about what we do about the geopolitical situation right now.
But the EU is a trade bloc. Let's remember that.
OK, but I am talking about the kinds of things our military leaders have been talking about all week long.
Yeah.
And every single major, significant military person we have here says we have to have militarily a closer relationship with Europe in the current environment.
Well, yes,
but that's not the same.
Europe is not the EU.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm saying that. I'm making that distinction. I'm simply saying, OK, I agree with it in that one area, but we do not need to be moving back into Europe by stealth.
Exactly.
It's like a weird form of the stealth taxing. We're going back in by stealth, and that's not fair to people.
No, but we're not going back in by stealth. Look, personally, I wish this Labour government was saying at the very least that we would rejoin the customs union because there would be significant benefits to us.
What about
but the government hold on, the government is not
trade deal.
The government is not saying that, and Keir Starmer is not saying that. He's saying no to rejoining the European Union, no to the single market and no to the customs union, but yes to closer trading relationships. And
Bill,
whenever you
every time you said that they're not going to do this and they've come back 2 weeks later and they've done it, I'd be a wealthy man today.
Well,
but that's the problem. You've got more sense than they do, Bill. And I respect you for that because you look at things in an objective way. Keir Starmer doesn't have those values that you do. He's ploughing on with this completely headless chicken policy about everything. He hasn't got values on this.
If he intended to take us back, say, into the customs union, I think he would have made that clear by now. And yet, at every juncture,
But isn't that his problem?
Every juncture, he's saying no to that. I personally
Isn't
wish
that
he
exactly
would.
his problem, though? He does things by stealth. He does things in a half-hearted way, changes his mind. He's inconsistent. That is his precise problem.
That is a big
But look, if this government cannot work out that increasing national insurance contributions and business rates and things on businesses hurt jobs, cost billions, then how can they be trusted with complicated EU law and business? How? They can't even sort this country out, yet they want to tie us into things that are complicated.
This whole mantra is stop the world, I want to get off. If you live in an inter-trading relationship and you want trade deals, that involves compromise. And the compromise of this is that we get a deal, we boost our agricultural exports by about 22% according to estimates. But if any government chooses to rip this deal up, which would be their right, as is part of any trade agreement. As is the part of any trade agreement that you sign.
I understand that, but I also think these are meant to be our greatest allies. These are the people, the coalition of the willing, all this military, all this stuff. We're meant to be friends. And we're not friends, we're adversaries, and we're not looking at this realistically, and the British government currently is not taking it seriously, that actually they don't have our best interests. No. They're looking out for their super bureaucracy. That's their job. Our job is to look out for Britain, and I don't think this government has understood that very well. Look at the fisheries deal we've done. Look at all the other things we've been doing around the world, Chagos and all these other things. Britain is not a priority to them, and that is why I've got this big problem.
The British national interest, and British people back this up in polling, the British national interest is to have a closer trading relationship with the European Union, and that's what the government's trying to deliver.
Give us another referendum, we'll win it again.